Imagine a farmer finding a woman in the middle of the forest and taking her to his home. Days earlier, Richard was working on his farm during one of the busiest days of the harvest. His farm was divided into cultivation areas between vegetables and fruits, and the animal area was small compared to other farms that had more land and more work areas. But Richard was satisfied with his property and worked hard every day to have his property in excellent condition. The man was mentally reviewing all the tasks he had to do to have everything ready before nightfall, but suddenly he heard what sounded like a car skidding and a loud noise. He looked up in confusion and soon saw a thin column of smoke spreading near him. Where did he go? What the hell was that? I hope he didn't hit my apple trees. Richard rushed to the location where the smoke originated, and sure enough, he found one of the crooked apple trees and a destroyed luxury car that was quickly being consumed by the flames. Upon checking the car, he noticed that the driver was not behind the wheel, so he felt somewhat relieved by the silence of the forest adjacent to his apple tree saplings. He noticed the sound as if someone was crawling. He continued towards the noise, and to his amazement he noticed that there were half-burnt clothes left on the road. His desire to know who he was took over him, and he decided to follow the path. He didn't have to go far when he suddenly saw a woman lying on her back trying to get up. He took off his shirt and ran to put it on. He noticed that she didn't have any clothes covering her. He saw that the driver was actually a young girl of around 20 years old who was actually unconscious and had no clothes on. But she was still breathing. He took her in his arms. The beautiful woman wanted to say a few words, but unable to do so, she fainted. There was a moment when he hesitated between examining this strange girl better or putting out the fire for a minute. He saw the immense flames rising, got up and decided that there was nothing else to do. The hose from his house wouldn't reach that far, and at any moment the car would explode again. Then he took the young woman in his arms and took her to his house. He placed her on his bed and made sure that she had no serious injuries other than the cut on her head due to the impact. He examined her quickly but carefully, saw that there was nothing to worry about, went to the kitchen and called the fire department, also requesting the help of some paramedics and explaining the woman's situation. 30 minutes passed because the farm was far from the nearest town. At that moment, the woman's car had exploded and much of her apple plantation was ruined. Richard was quite angry and saw how the firefighters managed to contain the fire so that the damage was not greater. Paramedics were tasked with examining and treating the young woman's injuries and found it a miracle that no vital organs had been damaged in the accident. This woman was alive thanks to Richard. "You are a hero, you saved a life today, Mr. Richard," said a member of the fire department. The 67-year-old farmer responded angrily, "I'm not interested in being a hero. What I want is for this woman to wake up soon so she can pay me for my lost harvest." The paramedics looked at each other a little uncomfortably. Well, old Richard had a reputation for being a very grumpy man and not being happy about any situation. And to top it off, the chief doctor replied that his complaint will have to wait. "We should take this young woman to the city hospital to make sure she is safe first." Richard reacted in a bad way, and with a powerful anger in his voice he asked her, "And how long will it be at least until she wakes up? Maybe the blow to the head left her disoriented and it's better for her to wake up in a hospital." The paramedic responded to reduce the farmer's anger. Despite the man's good intentions, his strategy didn't seem to work because Richard, angry, drove everyone off his property with his harsh manners. The days passed, and although in the apple forest one could smell the sweet, roasted aroma of the apple tree, that smell bothered Richard a lot. For him it was like a direct affront and the reminder of a debt that had not been paid every following afternoon. Finishing the typical tasks of a busy harvest season, he went to the hospital to see if the girl had woken up, but each time the nurse's response was the same. "No, Mr. Richard, but if you want, you can come visit in the morning." Irritated by the girl's condition, the old man entered the room and spent about 15 minutes watching her. The nurses weren't sure, but they came to the conclusion that the one who brought new flowers every afternoon was Mr. Richard. Well, no one else had come to see her or asked about the beautiful girl, although a report had been passed on to the police with the girl's description. Richard repeated that routine of going to the hospital every afternoon for approximately a little over a month. The doctors couldn't figure out who they should give reports on the young woman's health to. So they handed them over to Richard, who was the only one who came to ask about her. The old farmer listened patiently to the doctors who told him that it was very likely that the woman would wake up with a slight loss of memory and that in that case it would be best not to burden her with debt problems. Richard just nodded but didn't respond to them. He was very angry about the loss he had, but he also felt bad about it. The girl was so young, he didn't know what caused her to hit a tree in her house so far away from everything like her farm, but he was sure that girl was in a lot of pain right now. Finally, when the weather began to change one sunny afternoon while Richard was visiting, the girl began to wake up in surprise. Richard shouted for the nurses and doctors who were on duty. The doctors quickly pounced on her and pushed Richard out. Richard waited outside as long as necessary. 20 minutes passed before one of the doctors came out to tell him the latest progress. "Richard, just as we thought, this girl is very disoriented. She has no idea who she is or where she is. She constantly asked us for her phone number. Well, she says all the contacts should be there. Her information, but since we know she burned in the fire, we will keep her here for a few more days, but I don't think we can do anything. Otherwise, there is a possibility for her that she will stay in her home for a while until the police investigated and contacted her family." Richard grimaced. He didn't agree with such a young girl bothering her property all the time. He got used to being alone, but during these visits his heart also softened a little with a sigh. In the end he accepted the doctor's proposal. The old farmer didn't know it, but his peaceful and organized life was about to take an unexpected turn, just as the doctor had told him just 5 days ago that the young woman didn't have the ability to advance much in her memories. She just asked him to call her Paula, although she wasn't even sure if that was her name. When Richard showed up to take her home, the girl reacted badly. "Exactly why should I stay at this man's house? Man, I want to stay here until I remember something, at least have a little patience." The doctor began to explain to the young woman again, a little nervous about the young woman's attitude. "Remember, as I already explained to you, it was Richard who found you and rescued you. You cannot stay here because finding your relatives and your recovery could take a long time and, in fact, we do not have that time or resources to provide all the time you need. Richard is an honest man, everyone in town. We know him and he is the only one who keeps an eye on you. He visits you every afternoon and he was the one who rescued you. It is the best and only option you have at the moment." The young woman was grumpy and with a pout she took the small bag of clothes donated by the hospital nurses and walked out the door without thanking the doctor. He simply turned to Richard and said, "Let's go, we don't have all day." The old farmer said goodbye to the doctor as they had become friends after so long that he had been visiting that girl. Then he walked alongside the girl, showing her the way to his old work truck. Upon seeing such an old car, Paula made a gesture of displeasure, but got in anyway because they were on their way. The girl was arrogant. She said to him, "Do you have a phone? I want to check out social media to see if I can find anything about myself. The nurses didn't want to lend me theirs because they said the main thing was to find my relatives. But how are we going to find anything if they don't let me look?" Richard responded calmly, although the girl's tone made him desperate. "I have a cell phone, but I don't think it's what you want. I also don't have internet at my house." Paula opened her eyes so wide it looked like they were going to pop out. "You don't have internet, and how are you going to live and drink tea? You know, it's amazing that someone can live without the internet these days. What are they supposed to do while I'm with you?" The farmer smiled mischievously and said in a reproachful tone, I'm glad you asked. See, girl, a month ago you crashed your fancy car into one of my apple trees inside the forest on my property and you burned it to the ground. So I have news for you. You owe me at least $2,000 in damages, not counting the days of work, that is, the work. So what you will do while you get your memory back is, you will help me on the farm, and if you remember who you are and go back to your family, I trust your good behavior so you can pay off your debt. Judging by the BMW you were driving, I'm sure it won't be difficult for you." Paula was shocked to hear this. Richard thought the girl would protest and he was prepared to answer her, but incredibly the girl just said that she actually drove a BMW. Wow, my family must be rich. How exciting. I must recover my memory soon. The man sighed softly and thought to himself, you better do it soon, girl. When he arrived at the farm, Richard showed her the room where she would sleep and the rest of the house. Paula didn't like it at all at first, but she couldn't do anything but protest. You just don't have internet, you don't have a decent TV, there's nothing here. Since I have to live here every day. The farmer shrugged his shoulders and simply said, "Girl, I have a lot of work to do every day. I've already been distracted enough catching you at the hospital. Can you do me a favor and settle in quietly if you're bored? There are many things you can do here to help me. The pigs need food and I haven't finished harvesting the carrots yet. Could you wear something more comfortable and help me, instead of just stomping on the floor like a spoiled child?" Paula was upset, but decided to do what the man asked her to do. While tending the pigs and harvesting carrots, she tried to concentrate to awaken some memory, but it was useless. She just had a strange feeling that she should check social media and be careful to look her best, which was difficult in those ugly work clothes. At one point, she realized that she was completely covered in mud and dirt. She sighed as she said to herself angrily, "Now I understand why the nurses gave me such ugly and baggy clothes. They knew what I was getting into." The dynamic continued for a few days until one afternoon. After finishing the farm chores, Paula became completely bored of trying to improve the image on TV and simply sat down on the uncomfortable sofa and turned to Richard, who simply said nothing. He was focusing on finishing the crossword with the help of a dictionary. "Mr. Richard, why don't you have a wife?" Incredible as it may seem, the man paid attention to the question and answered, "A while ago I had a wife, but she left me and left the house. She said I had no ambition and she just took her things and left." Paula continued the conversation because she had nothing better to do. "We had a daughter, but as I told you, my wife was not happy with the life I was giving her here on the farm. She wanted something different and told me that this was not the life she dreamed of for our daughter. Then she left a long time ago with our daughter. I don't know if he found the life he wanted so much. But what hurt me the most was that she said she would never let me see my daughter again. Whenever I managed to find them, she hid the girl and told me that I was selfish for trying to be present in her life when I had nothing to offer. There came a time when I could no longer find them and I got tired of looking for them. Now I simply pray that my girl is okay wherever she is." Upon hearing this sad story, the young woman felt very sorry for that honest man who had such a difficult life. She asked some more. "What was your daughter's name?" The old farmer pouted and snorted, answering her name. "Just like you, her name is Paula. Although you say you're not sure if that's her real name. I hope it's not." The girl tried not to feel attacked. Now she understood more about this man who had seen one of the worst sides of life, and maybe that's why he showed himself like that. That night Paula stayed up late cleaning as a sign of gratitude for him being so honest with her. The next morning something totally unexpected happened. Richard and Paula woke up to 2 knocks on the cabin's worn door. The farmer took his old rifle as a precaution and opened the door without asking who it was. He was a little scared when he saw it was the police because they weren't the quiet city agents, they had special uniforms. They entered, knocking down everything and destroying Richard's few belongings, restrained him and ordered him to remain silent while they searched his house. The man remained motionless as the police searched everything until they finally heard Paula scream and one of the officers say they found it, which appeared to be intact. Richard shouted, "Can someone explain to me what is happening here?" A female voice among all the voices that were heard at that moment answered him. "What are you?" Unfortunately, Richard couldn't believe it, but he would recognize that voice anywhere in the world. It was his ex-wife who had abandoned him. "Joanna, what are you doing here?" "What do you think I'm doing?" replied the furious woman. "I'm rescuing our daughter." "Who did you kidnap without the slightest shame?" "I didn't kidnap anyone, woman, you went crazy. Didn't they tell you in town what happened? That young woman crashed her car on my property and burned down my apple forest." The police officers stared. The woman looking for an explanation. But suddenly Paula spoke up asking what was happening. Joanna completely ignored her ex and started to calm her daughter who didn't understand anything. After 15 minutes the police left the property without apologizing for the destruction and simply left Richard a warning about not approaching women when they returned home. Paula was in shock. Apparently she was a famous celebrity who had a lot of money thanks to her acting and modeling jobs that she had been doing since she was very young. Her mother was her arm right to Paula, who thanks to her had great successes that allowed her to have a luxurious life. At just 22 years old she made a name for herself among celebrities. "I can't believe you fit in well on that man's farm. I was so scared when I found out where you were that I immediately called the police, but don't worry, everything is fine here, I'm with you," said Joanna, her mother. Paula was still confused and a little scared by the fierce tension her mother had with Richard. She thought that maybe her mother wasn't telling her everything, so she decided to ask the businessman. "Well, Paula, the truth is that you disappeared because of a fight you had with your mother. She didn't want you to find out anything about your father, and all that stress was taking a toll on you at work, so you asked for a 3-month break to get your emotions in order." Her mother almost went crazy when she found out about this. "You hired a private detective and she was so angry that she even told you something that made you leave that morning in your car, taking a random route. We thought you would come back when you calmed down, but that wasn't the case. We got worried after 2 days and started looking for you. But it was only recently that the police got a lead on your whereabouts when your mother heard the police report and immediately went out to look for you with the help of the special squad under the pretext that her father had kidnapped you." Paula couldn't believe what she was hearing, but at that exact moment she made a decision. She worked hard to regain her memories, and when she felt well she went to talk to her father, ignoring the protests of her mother who was in her way to stop her from seeing the old Richard again. Richard had already come to terms with the fact that he would not see his daughter again. After seeing what she had become and starting to plant his apple trees again, he tried to come to terms with everything that had really happened, but one day, when he woke up very early, he saw a girl working in his fields. It was Paula, his daughter. "Hello Richard, I'm sorry about the way we met again, but I want to start over with you and I want to plant the most beautiful apple forest, at least try to recover. I mean, I'll pay for everything and I'll help you. I also want us to get to know each other better and have enough confidence to call you father." The old farmer's eyes filled with tears, and taking his daughter's hand he said that it will be the most beautiful orchard they will plant together. Richard and Paula hugged and both received the greatest reward they could have: the love of father and daughter.